Google just launched Antigravity, and it changes how you build workflows into actual beautiful software. But most people are using it like a chatbot, so they never get the full benefits of what Antigravity can actually do. In this video, I'm showing you exactly how I used Antigravity to build this logo animation app. Upload any logo, and it spits out a clean animated logo you can download, without touching a single line of code. But before we dive into the build, let's start with a live demo. After that, I'll break down each part of the process so you can see exactly how everything works. Let's get started. First, we go to the UI and upload our logo. Once it's uploaded, I'm going to select 16:9 for the aspect ratio. For the model, I'm using the first option, VO 3.1 fast. I'm not adding any creative direction, and I'm not adding any tagline or voiceover either. All right, now let's click Generate. Okay, and it's done. A finished render with a ready-to-use logo animation. And look at this. It also pulled out the brand name, the brand colors, and it even shows the prompt it used. Now we can either click Download or Regenerate to create another variation. Hi, I'm Fredy. I document these builds so you can skip the trial and error. I'll drop the full build notes and templates in the description. If you've never used Antigravity before, start by going to antigravity.google, download it, and install it. Once it's installed, open it up and log in with your Google account. That's it, you're in. Now, before we build anything, we need a project folder so Antigravity knows where to store everything. All right, now that you're set up, let's start building. All right, first thing, we need to create a file called agents.md. This file does two jobs. One, it tells Google Antigravity how to behave during the build. And two, it sets up the folder structure we need, so this project stays organized from the start. If you want my exact agents.md file, I'll leave the link in the description. In Antigravity, you can tag any file using the @ symbol. So I'm going to tag at agents.md, and then I'll prompt Antigravity to set up the project based on what's inside that file, by saying instantiate based on agents.md. And another nice thing here is you can choose different models like Claude Sonnet and Opus 4.6. Now let's tell Antigravity to run it. While Antigravity is setting everything up, let me explain what agents.md actually does, because this is the part that makes the workflow reliable. At the top, it defines a 3-layer architecture. Layer 1 is directive, what to do. These are basically SOPs written in Markdown. They define the goal, the inputs, what tools or scripts to use, what the output should be, and edge cases. Layer 2 is orchestration, decision-making. This is the agent's job. Antigravity reads the directive, figures out the right order of steps, and routes the work to the right tools. Layer 3 is execution, doing the work. This is where the deterministic stuff lives. Scripts, file operations, API calls, the things you want to run the same way every time. Next is the really powerful part, self-healing or self-annealing. That means when the system hits an error, missing files, setup issues, something breaking mid-build, it can troubleshoot, fix, and retry without you manually debugging every little thing. And then at the bottom, it defines the directory structure Antigravity should create for every project. A .tmp folder for temporary files, an execution folder for scripts, a directives folder for SOPs, and .env file for API keys and any credential files if you're using things like Google Sign-In. And now you can see it. In just a couple seconds, Antigravity created all the folders and starter files for us automatically. That's why this is so useful. It's predictable, repeatable, and you can reuse the same structure every time instead of setting everything up from scratch. All right, now that the foundation is in place, let's start building the logo animation app. I had this N8N workflow that could take any logo, then I'd use Vision to analyze it and pull out the brand's DNA. Stuff like the colors, font vibe, even tagline. Then it would generate a VO3 prompt, and that prompt is what I used to create the logo animation. Now I want to turn that whole thing into a mini app, so someone can just upload a logo and get the animation back without touching the workflow. So what I did was I wrote this little framework for myself, basically a checklist, and I'm going to follow it for the build. First step is collect and clean the logo. So user uploads the file, we store it somewhere temporary, we check the format, check the size, resize if needed, and we deal with the background. Like, is it transparent or not, so the next steps don't break. Then we prep it for image analysis and run Google Vision to inspect the logo and pull out the useful stuff. Brand name if it's visible, main colors, font vibe, and a short visual description of what the logo actually looks like. After that, we use Gemini to turn all of that into a clean VO 3.1 prompt, the kind of prompt VO can actually follow, and then we send it to VO to generate the animation. And the last step is deliver it in a real UI, a clean interface where the user sees the progress, previews the video, and can download the final animated logo. If you want access to the exact doc I'm following, including the N8N template, all the prompts I'm using, and access to the actual app I'm building right now, you can grab it inside my community. links right below. So now I'm just going to copy this prompt and paste it into Antigravity. And you'll notice up here you can choose which model you want to use. For this build, I'm going with Claude Opus 4.6. I'm also switching this to planning mode because I want it to plan first before it executes anything. That way we stay involved in the build, and it checks with us before it starts creating files, writing code, or making changes. As you can see, it's already thinking, and it's immediately mapping everything back to our 6-step pipeline. Collect, it's planning the UI for uploading the logo and capturing the user options. Clean, it's validating and normalizing the uploaded logo so nothing breaks later. Then inspect, direct, and render, which is basically the intelligence plus API side. Analyze the logo, generate the VO prompt, and then make the actual call to generate the video. And what's nice is it's not just doing stuff randomly, it's laying out a real plan for how it's about to tackle the build. You can also see it following our 3-layer architecture. It's going to create the directives that explain what to do, the execution pieces that do the deterministic work, and the project structure that keeps everything clean and repeatable. And look at this. It's already using its web search ability to research things like VO 3.1 and the Gemini API so it can figure out the right approach before it starts wiring anything up. It's also generating the markdown files as it goes, which is wild because it's basically writing its own instructions, like it's creating direction for itself so it knows how to behave as the build gets more complex. I'll show you exactly what it generated once it's finished. Look at this. It just generated an implementation plan for us. It literally named it the Logo Animation Pipeline and mapped it directly to our 6 steps. Collect, clean, inspect, direct, render, deliver. And it even flagged the parts where user review is required, so it doesn't just run off and make changes without us. It also called out the Google API key setup, and it added a dry run option, which is huge. That's basically a one-click toggle where the app runs end-to-end without actually sending the prompt to VO3 so you can test everything safely. And then, this part is crazy. It generated an architecture overview diagram. So the plan is a browser UI built with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, a fast API server handling the backend, including sending requests to Gemini, and then a set of files that handle the actual pipeline work, logo cleaning, brand analysis, prompt creation, and finally the video generation call. It even listed out the tech stack for front-end and back-end, plus all the supporting files it plans to create. And if you're coming from N8N or general automation, this is the big shift. You don't have to learn 100 nodes and memorize what every field does. You describe what you want, and Antigravity create the app, the structure, and the logic around it. That's why I keep saying Antigravity is a game changer. The learning curve drops hard. The only real downside is, if you're new to coding, you do have to trust it a bit at first. Because yeah, it can write a whole block of Python. And if you don't know what good code looks like, that can feel uncomfortable. But this is where the self-healing loop helps. If something breaks, we can tell it to fix itself. If we want a feature, we can ask it to add it, and it'll refactor the project as we go. As you can see, Google Antigravity has finished rendering the app. And look at this, it already produced a beautiful UI. You can either drag and drop your logo straight into the upload box or click to upload. It also added the exact controls we need. You can choose the aspect ratio, 16:9 or 9:16. You can choose the duration, 4 seconds, 6 seconds, or 8 seconds, and you can choose the model you want to generate with, whether that's a faster option or a standard VO 3.1 run. It even gave us an optional field for creative direction, so if you want a specific style or vibe, you can add it, but if you leave it blank, the pipeline still works. And then down here, you've got options for taglines or voiceover if you want to include that in the animation. And of course, the final generate button. Honestly, this is the part that blows my mind. Antigravity didn't just build the workflow, it wrapped it in a real, usable product interface. Okay, Antigravity is done. The setup's complete, and the workflow already looks really clean. Now we're ready to start rendering the app. But before we do, there's one change I want to make. Right now, the plan is to have Google handle the video generation, but I want Kai.ai to generate the animations for us instead. And this is one of my favorite things about Google Antigravity. You don't need to already know how Kai.ai works. You literally just grab the API docs, paste them into Antigravity, and tell it, I would like to use Kai.ai to create videos. Here is the Kai.ai API documents. Then Antigravity goes out to the web, reads the documentation, figures out the endpoints, the payload format, the auth, and wires it up for you without you manually integrating anything. And look, it's done. It already swapped the API key, and it replaced the render step so it now uses Kai.ai. Next, I want to bring in the exact prompts I used in my previous app. So for the inspect step, the image analysis step, I'm going to grab my analysis prompt from the community, copy it, paste it in here, and tell Antigravity, I need you to use this prompt to analysis the logos. And Antigravity will automatically find the right file, update the right function, and adjust anything else that needs to change so the pipeline stays consistent. Again, that's kind of insane. And one more thing, I also want Antigravity to use my system prompt for generating the actual animation prompt that gets sent to VO 3.1. So I'm going to go back into my community, copy my system prompt, paste it into Antigravity, and tell it, and use this prompt to generate the logo animation via VO 3.1 fast. And it'll take that prompt and integrate it into the render flow, so the outputs match exactly how I've been generating these in my previous workflow. Now, the only two things missing are the API keys. We need to add the Google AI Studio API key for Gemini, and we need to add the Kai.ai API key, because without those keys, the app is going to throw an error. It won't be able to call the servers to analyze the logo or generate the video. I can actually show you that right now. If we try to run it without keys, it can't make the requests, which means it can't do the image analysis, it can't generate the prompt properly, and it definitely can't render the animation. Now, if you open the .env file, you'll also see something called dry_run set to true. That's basically a safety switch. It lets you run the app without calling the paid APIs, so it can still go through the flow and generate the prompt, but it won't actually send anything to Gemini or VO, and it won't generate a real video. So once you're ready to fully test it, you need to flip dry_run to false. All right, let's tell Antigravity what to do. I'm going to paste in the Gemini API key and the key.ai key and tell it to update the .env file with those values and switch dry_run off so the app can run. This isn't just a workflow, it's a mini app someone can actually use. Catch you in the next video.